What if Italy and Norway united? The Italian peninsula was the home of the once mighty Roman Empire, but after its collapse, Italy would lose prestige as it would fall to the Germanic tribes, Byzantines, Franks, and Germans again, and would be split into many smaller states. After the Napoleonic Wars, nationalism and calls for unification would become louder, especially in 1848. The Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia would end up uniting Italy after defeating Austria, two Sicilies, and the Papal States. Its king Vittorio Emanuele II would become King of Italy, and the Kingdom of Italy would play a major role in European history. Benito Mussolini would end up launching a coup and become prime minister. He would steer the unready nation to the Second World War, and after a civil war the people would vote to establish a republic ending 86 years of Savoyan rule. Meanwhile, Norway was one of the three Norse kingdoms in the medieval age, and like their counterparts Sweden and Denmark, would wreak havoc around Europe. These three countries would end up uniting into the Kalmar Union, but Sweden would leave shortly thereafter and the Kingdom of Denmark-Norway would be formed that lasted until 1815. Another consequence of the Napoleonic Wars was that Sweden got Norway and formed the United Kingdom of Sweden and Norway that lasted until 1905, when Norway peacefully left and chose a Danish prince as king. Unlike Italy, Norway wouldn't play a role in European history except for joining NATO in 1949, but would become wealthy once it hit oil. There had never been any attempt or suggestion to unify Norway and Italy ever, and so you may ask yourselves why I'm doing this video. Well, a month ago I made a video about the veterans' riots in France succeeding, and at one point I stated that the West only controls southern Italy and Norway, and it sounded like it was some sort of unified country of sorts, which was called out by Bartas Sakaya, the purple guy, and so I thought to myself to just make this video. But what if that didn't happen? What if Italy and Norway united? In this timeline, Norway still becomes independent from Sweden in 1905, but instead of electing the second oldest son of King Frederick VIII of Denmark, namely Prince Karl, who would call himself Håkon VII as king, they instead chose to make Vittorio Emanuele III as King of Norway as Victor Emmanuel I. And thus would be formed the United Kingdom of Italy and Norway. In 1911, the UKIN would declare war on the Ottoman Empire and take Tripolitania, Cyrenaica, and the Decans. In 1915, 10 years after its formation, the United Kingdom of Italy and Norway would join the Entente, and would fight the Austro-Hungarians at the Isenzo, and help the British in their blockade against Germany. This timeline would see hardly any changes compared to our own time, and the post-war peace treaties are most certainly like our own, and Italy just got South Tyrol and Istria. In the United Kingdom of Italy and Norway, Benito Mussolini would still launch a coup, and make himself Duce of Italy and Leader of Norway. Benito Mussolini would still invade Ethiopia, which would be integrated into Italian East Africa with Victor Emmanuel III and first as emperor, and then Albania as well, which would become a puppet with Victor Emmanuel III and first as king. Meanwhile, in Germany, Adolf Hitler still becomes Führer and still annexes Austria, the Sudetenland, and Czechia. In 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union formed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and invade Poland, starting the Second World War. Poland would stand no chance, and would be split between the Germans and Soviets. The Soviets then invade Finland, the Baltics, and Bessarabia. Germany meanwhile invades Denmark, but would never have to invade Norway as it is under the control of Italy, which is friendly towards Germany, and thus without an embarrassment in Norway, Neville Chamberlain doesn't step down, and remains British Prime Minister. When Germany invaded the Benelux and France, Italy would join as well, but soon after France fell, the United Kingdom would sue for peace. Germany would keep its holdings in Europe, and the United Kingdom would be forced to stop supporting governments in exile. As for UK itself, the only territorial concession they had to make was to give the UKIN British Somaliland and Germany its former colonies back. The UKIN would also take Iceland, Greenland, Savoy, Nice, Tunisia, and Djibouti, while the other UK had to recognize French Indo as belonging to Japan and stop its sanctions. In Europe, France would be given back northern France, but the closed zone goes to Reichskommissariat Belgium and northern France. Germany also took its former colonies back, and also took French Congo, Gabon, Ubangi, Shari, and Benin on top of Belgian Congo. With that, the Second World War ends in a total Axis victory. In late 1940, Italy and Norway invades Greece and manage to take it down, and establish a puppet regime under the name Hellenic State. In spring 1941 the Axis, which now also include Romania and Finland, invade the Soviet Union and by fall of that year win in Moscow. In 1942 they cut of the Caucasus, and by the end of the year pushed the Soviet Union to the Urals. It was then when the army couped Stalin as was forced to make peace. It said peace treaty the Soviet Union loses all lands west of the Archangelsk-Astrakhan line, with Finland annexing Karelia and Kola and Romania annexing Bessarabia and Transnistria, with the rest going to Germany. The Soviet Union meanwhile would collapse and just control its holdings west of the Urals. Meanwhile, east of the Urals, Stalinists under Malenkov formed a rival Soviet Union while white émigrés took control of the Far East. They are divided between forces friendly to Japan and the United States, and also between liberals under Alexander Kerensky, monarchists under Vladimir III, militarists under Gregory Semyonov, and fascists under Konstantin Radzievsky, with the former two getting support from the US, and the later two getting support from Japan, and in the end Konstantin Radzievsky would unify the Far Eastern state. As for the rest of Russia, neither side is able to defeat the other. In 1945 Italy and Norway would invade Yugoslavia and Bulgaria and annex Slovenia and Dalmatia and puppets Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, and Bulgaria. In 1947 Victor Emmanuel dies and his son becomes king as Umberto II of Italy and Umberto I of Norway. 1949 Mussolini would die as well and Galeazzo Ciano would become prime minister. In 1948 Germany and the United Kingdom would invade Sweden and Switzerland, with Italy getting southeastern Switzerland and Norway getting Bohuslän and Jylland. The rest of Switzerland is annexed by Germany, while the rest of Sweden becomes a Reichskommissariat. With the death of Mussolini the German-Italo-Norwegian alliance breaks down and Italy-Norway forms an alliance with Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen to counterbalance the German sphere. In 1953 the German economy collapses, which resulted in a disaster in the German bloc, which got worse when Hitler was assassinated by Czech partisans on a trip to Prague. This caused practical anarchy. Romania would join the Italo-Norwegian bloc and invade Hungary. They would have to return Transylvania and Nicholas Horthy would have been overthrown, with Otto von Habsburg returning as king. In Africa all French and German colonies declare independence, but not particularly peaceful. Spain would invade Morocco and in Mauritania, and while Mauritania did remain independent they lost most of their land. Guinea would be forced by the UK to give its coastal region, causing instability, and a communist uprising took charge of the nation, while the Tuareg people rose up in Mali. Guinea invaded Mali and annexed the south. In Upper Volta the Sokoto would take over and invaded Niger. They annexed the southwest while the rest went to Azawad. Chad and Cameroon would end up under Italo-Norwegian rule. The United Kingdom also annexed Dahomey and Togo and re-established Free France and Côte d'Ivoire. They also took back Tanganyika, and South Africa took back Southwest Africa. Ubangi-Shari would become the Central African Empire, and a communist uprising took over Congo. Gabon would also get annexed by Spain. Katanga, Kiva, Rwanda, Burundi, and Selengo would all become independent as well out of the former Belgian Congo. Italy, Norway, and Spain would then partition French Algeria, with Italy, Norway getting more out of it. Turkey would invade Syria and annex the lands north and east of the Euphrates and puppet the Republic of Syria. In Eurasia the Soviet Union and the other Soviet Union realized the opportunity and form a temporary united front, and invaded the German holdings in Europe. At the same time Italy, Norway, and Spain invaded France from the south, while the British invaded them from the north, and Italo-Norwegian forces would also invade Sweden and Denmark. In the end of it Germany would lose all of its holdings in the east to the Soviets, its holdings in the north and south to Italy, Norway, and its holdings in the west to Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Germany itself is partitioned into Dabubia and Czechia, which are Italo-Norwegian vassals, the Rhenish Republic and North German Republic, which are pro-British regimes, and the Prussian Democratic Republic and Polish People's Republic, which are Soviet satellite states. With that the Soviet Civil War would resume, and it would be the militarists that would defeat the Stalinists, and Georgy Zhukov would become General Secretary of the Soviet Union until he died in 1974, followed by Viktor Kulikov until 2013, and then Valery Gerasimov. In the 90s, Japan would be faced with the lost decades and its empire would collapse as the people of China and Vietnam rise up. Furthermore, the Soviet Union would invade from the northwest. In the end, the Soviet Union re-annexed the Far East and Outer Manchuria while China regains independence with its borders from 1912. Thailand and Vietnam partitone Laos and in Cambodia along the Mekong River and Vietnam became the Indochinese Federation. In the North Sea, Italy and Norway would still find huge oil deposits, but the bulk of the revenue goes to Italy, which has more than 10 times as many people as Norway, meaning that Norway never gets as rich. In Italy and Norway, the fascist regime would fall in 1962 in a coup orchestrated by King Umberto, and democracy would be re-established. Italy would move closer to the West as the Soviet Union would be seen as the new threat. In 1983, Umberto I and II would die and his son Victor Emmanuel II and IV would become king of Italy and Norway. In this timeline, Italy and Norway would essentially be the superpower on the European continent, and while the average Italian is wealthier than in Hotel, the average Norwegian is poorer as they got the short stick. If you liked the episode, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.